Well, what's up, everybody? Welcome into the other side of the ball. This is episode 146. Got Dub going to be joining me, Mr. Hammond. Welcome in, sir. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. Sorry I
Of
missed last
course.
week.
Yeah, man. Hey, you know what? Family comes first. So I completely understand. So you gonna join us on the video today, or you got stuff going on in the background?
Well, just in case I have to do the running back and forth thing,
Ah, gotcha.
at least I'm relatively represented by this little avatar thing.
Yeah. It's not a bad little picture there. I got to figure out how to do that so that way when I do the same thing, you don't just get that. You actually see something. So I might have to do something there. We'll see.
I'll say the white jersey makes my hair look super gray, but at least I'm still active in the league apparently.
Hey, you know what? Happens to all of us, man. When you get older, things tend to get gray.
Yes, more than just some.
I wish I could say that there's that you're wrong there, but you are not wrong.
Well, and on a note like that, when things can either be gray or black and white, I think we'll awkwardly transition into the topic of the day, which is I think it's pretty black and white on some of these nominations for awards, right? There's guys that deserve it. There's guys that deserve a pat on the back, but just aren't in that tier. But then there's a gray area with some of these awards because I do think that there is a conversation to be had. But I think we did a full show just to kind of knock it out of the park. As Dub changes it to, I believe that's a baseball picture.
Yeah.
Um, Offensive Player of the Year. I think it's no question that OPOY nominees are not in the order I think they'll place. But in my opinion, as our discussion went, it would be Scott Hamilton, Sterry Codrington, and the record-breaking Kason Campbell. And I think what we had decided, at least on that previous podcast, was in general, other than CP3, shout outs to CP3, we kind of came to a consensus that the Offensive Player of the Year was going to be the wide receiver from BIC, Kason Campbell.
Well, it's not. The only thing is, we are not going to make that call. We are just going to put in for the three that we think are the. And I'm sorry, I'm going to be taking notes because I want to make sure we
Sure.
cover. But we're just going to be giving our thoughts on who we think should be, for these different positions, and the folks at home will have a chance to vote on it.
Well, sure. Now, I guess we'll influence them by saying that would be our choice. But I think the top three, and we did a pretty exhaustive show to kind of go over some of the potential nominees. But I think the top three would be the top two passers in the league, which would be Scott Hamilton and Sterry Codrington, and then the record-breaking season that Kason Campbell had for BIC at wide receiver. At least in my opinion, an Offensive Player of the Year award that a lot of times will follow statistics. That's the way the statistics look, when you look at them on paper. So I think those are a solid three to get us started on OPOY.
Oh, without a shadow of a doubt.
Now, we also, I think we did have a show just to kind of, put a lid on stuff we've already covered. We already did the Rookie of the Year show, and we had a decent list.
Well, I mean, we kind of, and that's why when we're talking about this, and when we were talking about it, it wasn't the fact that this show had the honors of doing this. So we were just giving our opinions. Well, now it's a little bit more than opinion. So that's why when I look at this, we've got to kind of do a decent job of this. And I mean, we had
Yeah.
um, who do we have? We had Canyon Stone King.
Well, I think and I think to rephrase what you're saying, I think we made our opinions pretty clear. I just think now that with the kind of the nod that we're going to be handling this in a very um, open forum and in a discussion type way, fans of the league can kind of see behind the scenes of the discussions, at least of to what goes into thinking about these awards.
Yeah.
Rookie of the year, when we were talking about it, we listed a lot of the potential nominations, and we went from the two standout renegades in Damon Smalls and Service, the quarterback. We traveled the coast. We're discussing some of the Insomniacs standouts at the edge positions of wide receiver, corner in Shannon Allen. And even though he really technically wasn't a rookie, I think I just mentioned William Carswell just because he popped off the screen. He only played a couple plays for the Gold the previous year, but he's listed as scoring touchdowns, so he's definitely not a rookie. Um, and so Shannon Allen, known as Prime, we talked about. There was guys we mentioned from Baltimore in Dirty Dan, the running back, who some might have said should have got the call. And we even mentioned some defensive rookies that stood out. Long for the Animals was one of the ones that I thought about. But I think the consensus is that the top rookies in the league last year were quarterback Kenyon Stone King, his wide receiver Siobhan Richardson. And if you go based on pure statistics, it would probably end up being Anthony Service, the quarterback for the Renegades, would be, in my opinion, the best three rookies of the year. Um, and that's negotiable, I guess. That may have that gray area we're talking about, where we could have entered a couple here and there. Prime certainly made his impact, second in the league in interceptions, was an offensive playmaker, and scored on defense.
And
Um,
on the 3-on-1.
exactly. And then if we mention the rookie that was second in the league in interceptions, we should mention the rookie that was first in the league in interceptions. In I believe it's Robert Long, the defensive back from the Silk City Animals, who again, like I said, led the league in picks. Um, but Canyon Stone King was third or fourth in all major passing statistics this year, behind Sterry Codrington, David Tender, and Scott Hamilton. So that's a pretty great season, if I would say so myself. Siobhan Richardson was in the third, second, or fourth in in no specific order. I'd have to double check the statistics, but he's in that range for receptions, yards, and touchdowns, leading even his teammate Darren Palmer in all those respective statistics. And not only did Service have the stats as either fourth or fifth in the league in all major passing statistics, but he turned around a team at the quarterback position that was 0-7 last year, and brought them to the playoffs, and was in a puncher's chance of beating the champs when they played in the playoffs. So I'm up for a discussion there, but um, those guys to me are at least on the short list. If we could, if we want to shave five down to three, we can, move guys here and there. But that was pretty much the summary of our conversation when we did that show.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to try to whittle these down to three per. So um, we have offensive player of the year, rookie of the year, defensive player of the year, and sorry, I'm writing these down. That's why we have what am I missing? Do we have returner of the year? I think that we should put in a thing for that.
Well, I don't think we had a discussion on the show that talked about the three awards. Well, at least that I was not present for defensive player of the year, MVP, and returner of the year. Those three awards we had not had an extended discussion, so I think um, we could get that started and get some feedback from the fans for some of the guys they're thinking about if they have any input in this open forum.
Well, I mean, here's the thing, and I agree with you. We should get some input if they're willing to give it. If they're not willing to give it, well, then they're going to have to go with one of our three choices.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
that's what it breaks down to. So um, I would start with because we pretty much okay. So offensive player of the year, you have Scott Hamilton, Sterry Codrington, and Kason Campbell. Rookie of the year, right now, as it stands, we've got Canyon Stone King, Siobhan Richardson, Shannon Allen, and Anthony Service. So we're going to have to cut one of those guys out, or we could leave the four. I mean, I was told top three, but you know what? I'm good with four. Defensive player of the year. That's where we're at right now, and I am. I don't have a good lead in for defensive player of the year. I know you did. You had who did you have originally that we talked about?
Well, honestly, we never
So
really
those.
got to that. So what I would say in the defensive player of the year, just the general conversation is the best defenses this season did have quite a bit of depth. So when you look at the raw statistics, um, and I'm sure he would be upset if I fail to mention this. The raw statistics show, at least from the defensive line position, the league leader in sacks was once again Isaac Negron, who is recently a two-time winner of that award. And if I were to ask just random fans who the most dominant defensive player in the league was, a lot might not mention Isaac, but his level of consistency and his ability to play more of that power lineman as opposed to a speed lineman. He's there to fill gaps, stop the run. He's also extremely effective at causing quarterbacks to feel the pressure and to land those pressures and hit home with a full sack. Pause, I guess. So I would say that he's definitely somebody that at least needs to be in the conversation if you look at the raw statistics and his impact for the BIC defense. But there's a ton of guys, even on the BIC defensive line, that I think also stand out when you look at them. We'll get to them later. The other thing, statistically, when you look at it, are the two rookies that we just mentioned. And if turnovers, which they are,
You mean
if
going back to Shannon
turnovers,
Allen?
yeah, well, both of the guys. If turnovers are among the most important statistic in football, if we're looking at guys that average approximately one interception per game in Shannon Allen and Robert Long, the two um, rookie defensive backs from their respective coasts, I think those guys definitely deserve looks because when we talk about Robert Long, the rookie in the defensive back side for the Animals, it also, brings up that defense had an entire makeover from the 24 season to the 25 season. He's one of the reasons. The other reason, in my opinion, would be another guy that I mentioned as a nominee, and we can whittle them down as we kind of go through it, which would
Mhm.
be Trey Baskerville, whose presence is felt even when he doesn't get the actual statistic, and he was one of the league leaders in that number of total sacks on the season. He also his ability to play, kind of like a flat zone with his length, you know, deflecting the ball away or getting in the face of a quarterback can't be, overlooked either, literally
Hey,
and
do you have
metaphorically.
this? Do you have the stats that you can look at?
They're in actually our chat. We just have to scroll up past a lot. I remember the note. It's the Google Doc. I'm opening it right now. I'm going to try to send it to you.
Okay.
Um,
Because I was just curious on Shannon Allen and Robert Long. Between the two of them, how many?
7 and 6 respectively.
No, but which one had the most returns for touchdowns off those picks?
Oh, returns. I don't
No, no,
have
no,
that.
not
Yeah,
returns.
yeah,
Who
yeah,
picked the ball
yeah.
off
Pick
and
sixes.
housed it?
Pick sixes. I
Yep.
think the pick six number would be, and I'm kind of out on a limb here. I don't know if I'm correct, but I'm pretty sure that it would be Shannon Allen. I think he had 4 pick sixes. Robert Long, I think he did have at least one, but I don't think he stacked up the scoring plays on the defensive side as often as Allen did.
Gotcha. Okay. And the only reason I'm asking about that because that is something to also take into consideration, right? So that's why I wanted to kind of get a snapshot of that.
Yeah, I
So
just
that way,
Chris, I just sent to your AOL Messenger,
yeah, I'm looking
the
at it.
Facebook Messenger, the stats. I don't think they have pick sixes on the listed stats. But if we're talking other guys that had a huge impact on the
Hmm.
defensive side of the ball for the Renegades, just kind of to mention that multiple guys on that defensive line were big time performers, but it was more of a collective unit that worked than any individual guy that stood out specifically.
Hmm.
So I think they deserve credit because they were a force.
That's
But
interesting. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, but I mean, when you look at the statistics, the guy that wears number 12, I think, and his name is like, something dog, big dog. Um, there's Damon Smalls and Dondre Haynes. None of those guys, separated themselves from each other statistically. So it's hard to lean that way. But when you look at BIC, there's a bunch of guys that could get the nod as far as defensively. Um, but it would be, it might be a shock to people who only watched the championship game. Obviously the defensive MVP of that game, Matt Riddick. I mean, season statistics aren't there because he just wasn't the every down starter at defensive back. So when you look at BIC, some of that conversation that started the offseason, discussing their roster and some of the guys that they had on that roster, the depth of the BIC defense, it almost came back to bite them as far as handing out the award. Although, like I mentioned earlier, Isaac Negron does stand out as the league leader in sacks. And then when you look at the Insomniacs, I think we already mentioned the rookie Shannon Allen, who's a standout. I think he's obviously getting the benefit of playing on the opposite side of a field of a Danye Lyons, who can be a dominant shutdown corner and kind of funnels passes away from him, which meant that Allen was getting the opportunities. So we may overlook him for this award, but I think the reason that we're overlooking a Danye Lyons is because his impact is felt in that he's completely missing from the stat sheet because nobody's even willing to try that side of the field.
Well,
But I will,
he still had 3 picks.
yeah, exactly. And I would say that of the defensive players that I saw week in week out, one of the hardest guys in the league to deal with is Chris Cunningham, and their defensive ends are also extremely talented. And when we were talking about rookie of the year, we were talking about Moses Smith. He just, in the grand scheme of things, I think there's, when you look at some of the stats of other rookies, hard to overlook them in his case, to replace him. But
Yeah, Moses Smith had 4.5 sacks, which
yes,
isn't
which
bad
is
in 6 games.
But
which is nothing to.
sometimes sacks don't tell the whole sacks sometimes don't tell the whole story,
Well, it doesn't tell any. It
and
doesn't begin to tell the whole story.
and really sometimes filling up the stat sheet doesn't tell the story either. I mean, it's all about your impact, and I mean, in a sense, Moses Smith being on there almost kind of for. I mean, it's really weird for me to say this, but the way Moses Smith played on the defensive line almost kind of made you forget about AJ McQuaid, which is kind of hard to do because AJ is a standout on his own. But I mean, sometimes you just realize, oh, 20's still there. Oh, sometimes he was like the forgotten man on defense because all the praise or accolades, if you will, was going to Moses Smith and Chris Cunningham, and sometimes AJ had to remind you, "Hi, I'm still here. Remember me." But I mean,
Well, and the reputation of AJ means that as offenses kind of try to solve the enigma of the Insomniacs defense, one of the things that they're going to try to make sure doesn't beat them is a guy that they've seen beat other teams. So that means that it opens up opportunities for other guys. So in a similar way that you look at Adonye Lyons, quarterbacks aren't testing his side. That gave opportunities to Shannon Allen in the defensive backfield. Similarly to the defensive line, um, dealing with an AJ McQuaig opens up for Moses Smith, RTC when he was in, and then Chris Cunningham, which played more of the defensive tackle position. Again, maybe doesn't have the specific stats, but his presence is felt, in every game you watch for the Insomniacs, because at times he seems like he's unblockable, and
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 that's
when
beat,
you're
and that's even beating double teams because a lot of times, how many times did you see him double teamed in the championship game because of just the pressure that he was applying? I mean, he necessarily didn't get to Sterry, but he made Sterry maybe release the ball quicker than he would want to because of the relentless pressure from Chris Cunningham.
or you look at the running game for BIC, which was non-existent except for the one or two or three times that Sterry got a little busy. The running game was completely null and void for BIC pretty much the entire game, because the middle of the offensive line of scrimmage, it seemed like every single time it was Chris Cunningham that got the penetration and forced the runner away from the middle of the field, but into the arms of one of the other defenders, if it wasn't Chris himself making the play. So, for defensive player of the year, it's hard because that like we're kind of hovering around. There's two ways to look at it. There's impact on the game, in which a regular season, in which, like, for instance, a guy like Wolverine plays all season, which he didn't. So that's why he's not necessarily in discussion for the award. Um, having a guy that controls the middle of the field from the middle linebacker position, invaluable, may not show up on the stat sheet, but you could tell when you're watching the flow of a real game. There's nobody wants anything to do with the middle of the Washington defense. And I think that impact is part of what goes into this award, as well as when we look at the raw statistics, who deserves it based on what they were actually able to put on paper, which, to be clear, that's the result, right? Playing in a play and doing all the things is fun. But if you don't end the play in a tackle, a sack, or an interception, you're just part of the whole. A lot of the guys that stand out in the statistical side of this, I think, deserve a serious look, including a guy like Isaac, because he may not have felt like the defensive player of the year when you're watching BIC's defense at times, but at the end of the day, when it came down to it, he got to the quarterback more times than anybody else in the league did all season. So just a thing that kind of goes into it, and makes him probably a nomination. But I would be interested to hear what you guys think of, who just embodies the award regardless of the statistics, because I think the conversation might go a little bit differently if we define the award, one way or the other.
Well, I mean, I think we just did. I think that what we said was the biggest impact, not necessarily the best stats. You've got to look at things as far as, in my eyes anyway, when you're talking about a defensive player of the year, it doesn't necessarily mean it's the guy with the most sacks or the most interceptions. It's the guy with the biggest impact on his defense for his team. And those are pieces that are, very hard to measure, because it's kind of like an MVP. If you took him off the team, the MVP, and he was no longer with the team, would they still have done what they did? I mean, if the answer is yes, well, then obviously we don't have ourselves an MVP. If the answer is no, not even close, well, then there's your MVP. So I think that we've got to look at this with open eyes, and also feel that it's not just a statistical thing. Where I do agree with you. Isaac Negron he had what was it, 9 sacks if I'm not mistaken,
He had a good season,
and
right?
that's a pretty damn good season. Trey Baskerville had 6. Ole Bell had 6, and then somebody that we didn't even mention, Daniel Quinn, had 5.5.
Ah, the
So I
mighty
mean,
Quinn, quietly
yeah,
with a 5.5.
exactly. So when we're talking about it, we can't just look at their totals on what they did as far as their sacks, their interceptions, and I'm talking about Rob Long and Shannon Allen.
Right.
Because when I look at that too, there's 2 interceptions that separate them. Unfortunately, it doesn't say how many they returned for touchdowns. But then you also have Deion Southern, who had 4 interceptions.
Right.
And Kanye Lyons with 3.
I would say this, since we have, what's up, Derek? Since we have
What's up?
our working definition, then who's the one guy that you think kind of stood out as far as overall impact on the defense for both Dub and Chris, and then I'll give my guy if he's not already used.
Well, I mean, it's truly it's a difficult piece because obviously when you talk about that, you also have to talk about the position, right? So, are we talking about defensive end, defensive tackle, linebacker, cornerback, or safety? So when I look at the overall, I do think that Cunningham had a fantastic year, but he wasn't there all season. He didn't play all season. So that to me is unfortunately going to be a little bit of a minus in my book because of him not having the stats to begin with for playing all season. So I've got to kind of take a step back and look at that. But at the same time, Isaac Negron had the most sacks in 9, but I think that he also had some other plays that made offenses kind of shy away from him. So it is one of those situations that, okay, when we break this down, I would have to, we're going to throw in 3. I think my 3 would have to be Isaac, Trey, and Chris, even though Chris didn't play all season and he was missing games. It's either Chris or Shannon Allen or Robert Long. Those are, really it takes us all the way back to all of them. But at the same time, I would have to, if I had to choose 3 out of those guys, in no certain order, Isaac, Shannon, and probably Cunningham.
Dub, do you have a guy that stands out to you?
Well, for me all season, it's been Moses Smith. I mean, the young kid just came in and basically said his presence felt. And like I said earlier, in a sense, almost kind of made you forget that AJ was playing on the other side of the defense because Moses, for a lot of times, impacted the game defensively for the Insomniacs. And oh, by the way, when you do add a Chris Cunningham, it makes a very fearsome threesome up front on that defensive line. I mean, to find the kid is only 20 years old, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
And who is already built and put together. Like, he could go play middle linebacker in pads if you want to, because the kid is that built and that compact. But I mean, I just cannot say enough about the young man, just how well he adapted playing from college football and coming to the A7. I've just been very impressed by him.
Yeah, I think it was definitely impressive. I think the one thing that kind of hurts Moses is, we could just rattle off the list of guys that had a really good season at defensive line for the Insomniacs. And not that it diminishes his ability or his impact, but maybe in the scope of this conversation, maybe his importance, right? Because if the way we're framing this, like Chris said, is if you take Moses Smith off of the Insomniacs, what do they have? Well, they have a guy who in RTC who's rotating in. They have a healthy Chris Mouth McWilliams. They have AJ McQuaid. They have Cunningham, etc. So I think you're right, and I loved watching him play. But the guy for me that kind of embodies the way that we describe the award based on impact, and if you took him off of the team, just look at the empirical data of 2024 to 2025. The Animals defense, guys, and this kind of hides the lead because there's two possibilities based on our conversation. In 2024, guys, the Animals defense was abysmal, right? They were letting up in the
To say
playoffs.
to say the least.
Yeah, they were letting up like 70 points, and that was on a good day, um, against the top teams in the playoffs at least. And that's a far cry from their 2025 run. Now the Insomniacs in the heat against a tired, uh, sun-scorched, and understaffed Animals barely got to 62 on a record-breaking day from their quarterback. And I think when you look at the rest of the season, in which they were among the league leaders in yards against and points against as a defense, the Silk City Animals went as their defensive lineman, Trey Baskerville, kind of brought them. And even when you look at that playoff game in which they were struggling against the Watchmen, it was a play from their defense that kind of sparked that victory. And it was Trey Baskerville, I believe, that kind of started that off, with an amazing play on his own, to kind of solidify. And even in the Insomniacs game, there was times early in the first half where it looked like Trey Baskerville was among the best players on that field on either side of the ball. And
So, Corey,
when you
did you say that and I'm just trying to understand, you said that the Insomniacs struggled to get to 60?
I mean, it felt at times a struggle, but I mean,
No,
60,
I'm just
right?
asking
60 is
because
no struggle, right? I mean,
I'm
I
like
mean,
60 is never a struggle, but okay.
well, when we were watching that first half, were the Insomniacs playing their best football?
Not even close. And they
Yeah,
also
so
let their
that's
foot off the gas in the fourth quarter.
of course, and I think that what we saw was that when it got to a certain point in that game, the depth of the Insomniacs and the their their at least understanding of what it's like to be in that heat a little bit better than what the Animals were used to with only 15 guys. I think the score there on in that game at least isn't specifically telling to how the competitive parts of that game went. However, a 60 burger is a 60 burger. They got to eat that shit.
Sure.
My point though is that when you brought in Trey Baskerville, if you're the Animals, it completely changed the entire face of that defense. Similarly to the way that Huff changed the face of the Animals, coming in the year that he won his MVP. And for Trey Baskerville, in my opinion, his impact is undeniable because I'll ask you this: other than Trey Baskerville, who was rushing the passer effectively for the Animals? Now, I saw a couple of guys do it, but the thing is they don't jump off the screen. And do you guys know the other guys that were even rushers for the Animals?
I
Which
could
may not
probably
be
look
fair
them
because it's
up.
been a while.
I could probably look them up, but that's,
Yeah, like
here's the
the
thing.
guy IG Live was one of them, and guys got pressure, but
Yeah.
the tone was set with Trey Baskerville, and if he had a good game, the Animals almost always won that game, and the games the Animals lost, it probably wasn't because of the play of their defensive end. So in my opinion, he's a guy that stands out to me and is definitely one of the three that I would nominate for this list. Um, but I would like, we do have to give three. So that's kind of where I was going. If I were to have to die on a hill, it would be that, just out of the way that we're defining the award based on impact on your team, I don't
Mhm.
think that there was a bigger impact felt than the addition of Trey Baskerville to the Animals defense.
Well, and that might be 100% true. We're still going through this and trying to figure out who the three are going to be. And I will give you that. I just don't know. Sitting here thinking about this and not have watched some of the other games, I don't know what Baskerville was like in some of the other games. I know what he was like, obviously, with the Insomniacs. And the thing about it is, when you start looking at him, is he a difference maker for the team? He sure seemed to be. And that's one of the things that I would have to say. He was the one that was consistently making plays when there was plays that needed to be made. So I can't argue that fact with you at all. But I also think that when we start to talk about these guys, the question mark becomes who goes, right? Because if you were to say, okay, well, we got to do Isaac, we got to do Trey, who's your third? And that's the hard choice.
I would argue, like my argument and the way that I tried to frame it, so that we could almost each have a guy. The rest of the three is negotiable for me. As much as I love Isaac, and as much as the pure stat total would say he's the guy, in my opinion, you look at the rest of that BIC defensive line. They're so stacked. It's almost hard to say that just the one guy stood out when. We could talk about a possibility of like 3 or 4 or 5 guys, similar to the conversation we're having about the Insomniacs. So if we're doing a whittle it down to 3, the only one that I'm non-negotiable on, I guess, just in my opinion, would be, I think Trey Baskerville deserves a nomination.
Okay, fair enough.
And since there's 3 of us, maybe if you guys have the guy, like, for instance, Dub's saying, "Hey, Moses Smith is my guy." That's just it. I think we could, it'd be interesting. Rookie of the year, we had, the conversation was 3 offensive guys. So it would be interesting if we just had specifically defensive rookie of the year who would win it out. Because the other 2, I think that the league leaders in interceptions are also, big time.
Personally, I think there should be an offensive rookie of the year and a defensive rookie of the year.
Yeah, if we're doing that, then we should have that combo. But yeah, so who would you if we have to do 3, and I'm saying, hey, we got to put Trey on there as the 3. Let's whittle down to who the other 2 would be if you guys agree that Trey at least deserves.
Defensive player of the year?
Yes.
Okay. Dub?
Somebody other than Trey. I mean, I would still, even though he played about maybe half the season, but still, I can't deny the impact that Chris Cunningham had for this defense when he was in there. It's hard not to include him in this category. And I mean, it's hard because there's so many great defensive players that didn't play the whole season, but when they were there, you saw the impact and how they dictated the pace of the game. And for that matter, I don't think that should be held against them. But I think going forward, next season, just like how in the NBA you have to play at least 65 games to be considered for the MVP, I think I think going forward next year there should be a rule that you have to play a certain amount of games to qualify for all these awards. Because
well, to be fair, Dub, you don't have to wait because we're kind of the committee deciding it. So if you want to make that call, we have full authority right now. So if you want to make a statement that if guys want to be recognized, that they have to at minimum be available and show up, this is the time to make that statement.
Well, so the season, so the regular season is what, 7 games, give or take 7 games per se, with no cancellations. This, then the third 7. Let's just say it's 7 games per se. At least play in 3.5 of those games to be considered. Because I mean, if you sign up register and you only play 2 games per se, I don't think you should be rewarded for a reward because you were only there for 2 games. It's like, where were you for the rest of those 5? Give or take. But I mean, Corey throwing shade, but I mean
Not
that's
shade. I mean, it's
Who
the
did you say, Corey?
statistics. I said Matt Riddick.
He said
I mean,
Oh.
we started it by saying if there's a guy on BIC and you just watched the championship game, you might be like, oh, Matt Riddick. Well, Matt Riddick wasn't there all season, so yeah, I think. What's up, Will? I think it's very
What's going on,
important
Will?
that as the people deciding who gets recognition, that we kind of take that stance. If the thing is that I didn't see every down of in every play of all of the Vegas games this season. You guys did. You called the games. That being said, if Chris Cunningham wasn't there long enough to be the guy, then guess what? He's not the nomination. I would argue that I don't even know if he was there all season either. But if Shannon Allen on that same team has the 6 interceptions and I think something like 4 of them were returned for touchdowns.
no. Prime was
I
there all
would-
year. Prime was there all year.
I would rather if it's got to be an insomniac, give it to the guy that was all year making
It doesn't
turnovers.
necessarily have to be an insomniac.
No,
but
I
think
know that. I'm just saying hypothetically, just for the where the conversation just went in if I don't know. Dub brought it here, but if we have minimum.
Yes, I did.
If we have minimum requirements, we don't have to wait to impose them. You're just beat.
I'm just saying other leagues have guidelines because that's like saying so the padded football league that Corey does not like. Okay, they play 17 games. Okay, what would that say awarding somebody an MVP that played 9 games that season, as opposed to the other nominees that played the full 17 games? For most people, they would. For most people, they would.
Let me paint a picture for you, though. If you say that, what if you were a player like Carson Wentz, who goes down injured in the middle of the year, and Nick Foles comes in, takes your Philadelphia Eagles team to the Super Bowl, and wins the Super Bowl? Even though he only played in 9 games,
he still gets a ring.
Yeah, and he should be looked at for MVP too. He came in and half the season and took the damn team to the Super Bowl.
What's funny is that people were saying that Carson Wentz was having an MVP season that year before he got hurt.
I know. I couldn't resist because you usually don't have such a contrast that you can actually look at, and in this case we did. But in reality, Carson Wentz went down with I think 3 games to go. So, if I'm not mistaken, it wasn't 9, but
only other scenario would be Jeff Hostetler when Phil Simms got hurt back in 1990 with the Giants.
Correct. But I mean, let's throw this out the window because I mean we could debate this until hell freezes over. The bottom line is if you want to go with Chris Cunningham because that's the way you feel that should be your player, then go with it. I mean, look, we can impose. The thing about it is these guys didn't know about this at the beginning of the year.
They did not.
Granted, it should make a damn bit of difference, but
it's also a sliding scale of import, right? The Insomniacs did not need him against the Hunters and Gold games if he missed. The games that he did play and dominate. They have a sliding scale of importance. So if he was there for the whole playoff run, then maybe that's the hypothetical argument Dub can have with himself. It's usually me arguing with myself. I think Dub is nominating Chris Cunningham and then saying that there should be a limit, right? No, I'm just joking.
I said going forward. I'm not talking about 2025.
Well, then fuck it.
I'm talking about
that's next year. This year.
Yeah. But this year.
So there we go. So we
this
got
year. No, if strictly about this year, Cunningham's my pick.
There you go. So we'll go with Chris Cunningham, Trey Baskerville, and I'm going with Shannon Allen.
And really, truthfully, there is no wrong answer with any of those 3.
No.
And they're all 3 are very, very deserving to be considered for this award.
I want to look when I look at Defensive Player of the Year. Okay, when I look at that, I want to look at that with eyes wide open. And the reason why I say that is, was Shannon Allen just a defensive playmaker? No, he wasn't. He's a defensive playmaker. He's an offensive playmaker, and he's a 3-on-1 playmaker. So that's why when I look at this, because we're putting these guys in silos, this happens to be one of his silos. So this is where, in my eyes, I think Shannon Allen should be one of the three. Right,
I would
wrong,
even
or
argue,
indifferent.
as much as he had an impact other ways, if you just isolated it to his defensive impact, I think that it's definitely deserving. Um, and I'm cool with those three nominations, and then maybe, you know, we could call it the lifetime achievement nomination. We just say Isaac Negron so that when I see him, he doesn't have to remind me 13 times as he pulls me over, because he is an actual police officer. So if he does pull me over, I want to have that in my back pocket like a PBA card.
Mr.
Hey, you got
Officer.
the lifetime achievement nomination. So those could be our three guys, and then an asterisk next
Well,
to Isaac.
well, hopefully that's not a situation where you have to pull that out and use it all the time, Corey.
Well, it has not yet to happen, but it's long since become a, not as important of an organization. But when I was a kid, I was a Boy Scout. I was taught to be prepared.
Be prepared. Sorry.
So
I was just there.
if we're gonna
Star says
run through
hello.
the rest of these, we kind of have to get to them. So my next one that I have right now that we'll have to discuss is MVP.
What's funny about the MVP is we had CP3 on. We had the conversation because, statistically this season, as well as when you look at import this season, the champs probably have the best argument for the winner. When we do MVP, there's going to be other nominations, but the top two,
Sterry
excuse me.
Codrington and Kason Campbell.
Yeah, and then when we had the Offensive Player of the Year MVP debate, I think our argument against CP3 was, since the wide receiver is a dependent position, and Sterry Codrington, in my opinion, had a 0 turnover season as a starting quarterback that led the league in both rushing and passing. That's the end of the conversation there for me. I mean, I think he had like around 10 or 12 more touchdowns passing than any other competitor. He was the rushing leader in total yards, and he failed to turn over the ball once all season. That sounds like the definition if you were to, create a player in Madden.
How many touchdowns did you say he was up?
I think he threw for 38. I think
That-
the next closest was like
30,
25, 26.
38.
No, the next closest was 28.
Okay, so and that was Tender, right?
Nope, that was Scott Hamilton.
Oh, it was Scott.
Oh, wow.
Yes. Yeah. So there we go. So again, I said it was about 10 more in the air than any other competitor, and 28 for second place. That's a great season. We're not talking about 16 or 17 games. We're talking about 10.
So here's the breakdown of touchdown passes. So obviously, Sterry had 38, Scooter had 28, Tinder had 20.
20.
Next, Stone King was next with 17, and Anthony Service had 15. So, and here's the thing, and by no means, Stone King only threw 3 interceptions. Scooter only threw 3 interceptions. Tinder threw 9. But here's the thing. Scooter led the league in yards per completion at 23 yards. Sterry only 16, which is still quite impressive. But the completion percentage, 67%. Obviously, Sterry led the whole way. And actually, second in the league completion percentage-wise is Mr. Burrows, Captain America, like 0.5 ahead of Stone King.
Yeah, but in like 2 games.
True, but still, I'm just going off what I'm seeing.
Yeah. So I mean, Canyon Stone King definitely had a more accurate season. and there were games that Burrows could have played and didn't if he wanted to be mentioned. But yeah, I mean, listen, we're going to nominate 3 for the MVP. I think the easy first nomination would be the quarterback for the championship team, almost by default. But look at his stats, kind of makes sense. Because the thing that we're not mentioning in the passing breakdown of statistics is as much as Sterry lapped the competition a bit in passing numbers, he also led the league in rushing, if I'm not mistaken.
No, Tinder got him by 14 yards.
Oh, well, okay. So almost led the league in rushing. I mean,
But he was second behind Kareem Williams, but Kareem Williams only played 3 games. But Sterry averaged basically a first down a run.
Yeah,
Yeah.
10.4, but so did Tender. Tender
Yeah.
was 15.1.
15.1, yeah.
Yeah, Tender set a record for rushing touchdowns in a game too. That's crazy.
Yes, he did.
So I don't know. I would say that for MVP, I think you start with Sterry. I think the next conversation you have is you look at Kason Campbell. As impressive a season as Sterry had, Campbell's in comparison is even more impressive. I think he doubled a lot of the statistics that other guys had. He
No,
was
not
around
quite
he was
doubled.
he was around 1,600 yards on the season.
1,047.
Only 1,000.
Yep, 1,047. I'm looking at it right now.
Kason Campbell.
23 touchdowns.
Oh, all right. Well, I'm exaggerating a bit. I thought he was in the 1,500 range. I must be wrong.
So, and then you had
Siobhan
Siobhan
Richardson, I think,
Richardson
is
was
second.
number 2, and he had 2 less games. He had 727 yards, averaging 25.1 per to Kason Campbell's 19.4. But he did have 23 touchdowns. Campbell did to Richardson's 12. And Manny Diaz actually had 13 touchdowns. So you only have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 players with double-digit touchdowns as wide receivers. David Clark, Ashante Worthy, Manny Diaz, Siobhan Richardson, and Kason Campbell are the only 3 with double-digit touchdowns. And they are also happen to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 guys, the top 6 with 500 receiving yards or more, starting with David Clark, Zareel Wright, Ashante Worthy, Manny Diaz, Siobhan Richardson, and Kason Campbell. That's it.
Yeah, and I think when you look at MVP, if there's a wide receiver, it would be Kason Campbell maybe on that list, maybe not. If we're talking about MVP, but for me, the MVP for me would be Scott Hamilton, Sterry Codrington, and Kason Campbell, which would be the same exact nominations of the Offensive Player of the Year. You can make the argument, I guess, RTC, he does play both ways. He is the heart and soul of that Insomniacs team, and they go as he goes. But that would be my 3, up for debate, obviously. But, Sterry, Campbell, Scott, Scooter.
Well, and that to me is one of those situations that if we're going to put, I can't have the exact same 3 guys as MVP as Offensive Player of the Year. That's leaving somebody out that we really have overlooked if we're going to say that the 3 guys as Offensive Player of the Year are also the 3 guys for MVP.
I mean, there is usually overlap, but
yeah, I mean 1 or 2 players.
The only guys that maybe overlooked for MVP, maybe David Tender, but I would argue that in the games that he missed, the Animals still won. So,
but I don't think they put up the points that they had with Tender.
In the playoff game, they actually had so no in general, but the one playoff game that was on Games of the Week, the first round against the Heathens, they actually had the widest margin of victory in the history of their organization, and it was CJ at quarterback, not Tender. Now that was a full team performance. It wasn't, like CJ. I mean, it was four quarterbacks took snaps in that game, all not Tender. Um, yeah, I mean, you could throw Tender in there as another option, but I would argue that Tender's season, especially missing games that the Animals still won, which is kind of the antithesis, right? I mean, the Insomniacs did the same thing, but I would argue that Scott Hamilton had a better season than his counterpart in the Final Four, David Tender. Um, I could be dissuaded. Again, we talk about the rushing yards of Sterry Codrington. David Tender is the leading rusher for his team and the league, so maybe he's up there. You get to look at his wide receiver, Manny Diaz, but I don't know. I don't know if there's a three-way player, like we had that one year with Huff, who played both ways. Maybe Shannon Allen prime because he played, all three sides of the ball. Maybe RTC because he played defensive end and running back for the Insomniacs and is their anchor. Maybe you look at a guy from Sick With It, although, I would argue.
And what position are you talking about? Are you talking about for MVP?
I mean, hypothetically, if we're not going to go with Sterry, Kason, Scott, then we have to replace.
I would put Sterry, Kason, and Scott as the three guys for MVP. It's when we talk about Offensive Player of the Year that I would kind of take another look at that. Kason Campbell, I would definitely leave in there for Offensive Player of the Year. But I also have to look at Siobhan Richardson for that position, and I would also have to look at who's the other one Manny Diaz, because those other two guys were very impactful for their teams.
Well, did they have better offensive years than the other two guys that we would maybe take out?
If you're putting Kason Campbell and Sterry Codrington in for MVP, then yes. If you weren't putting them in for that other award, then I would say leave them in for Offensive Player of the Year. But the fact of the matter is, I find it very hard for the exact same three players to be an Offensive Player of the Year and MVP. That's just me.
Why do you feel that way?
Because I think that you're limiting yourself and you're not opening your eyes to what could be. When you're talking about Offensive Player of the Year, I've got to look at a Manny Diaz. I've got to look at a Siobhan Richardson. I've got to look at Kason Campbell as the three guys for Offensive Player of the Year. Now, when you step to MVP is the most valuable player, period. So that's why Sterry Codrington, Kason Campbell, and Scott Hamilton make sense in that situation. And I would even be willing to replace Kason Campbell because I think, in all honesty, Kason Campbell is the Offensive Player of the Year. You're going to make him MVP too?
I think that's something that
I think you're selling other players
happens,
short when you do that.
But I would say that there's a precedent that the best statistical offensive player in leagues before has also won most valuable as well.
True.
I would not that we have to go against you, Chris, but I would argue that when we do the definition of the award, nowhere in the definition of the award is if guys are nominated for somewhere else, they don't deserve the nomination.
And that's not my thought on it. But my thought on it is when you only have three players that you can choose, and you're going with the top three, it makes it look very, very interesting. I'll put it that way, where you're going to make the top three Offensive Player of the Year and MVP the exact same three players.
Well, I think we can make the argument that if Sterry is the most valuable player on BIC, that it diminishes maybe the value in the MVP conversation of his wide receiver. But if we're saying that Kason is a hypothetical MVP candidate, I don't think that the other options, because what we're doing is if we have the three there and we have to replace one or more of them, we have to make the justification that they deserve the award more than that guy. So if we're saying in our opinion, which isn't what we're doing here, we're just doing the nominations. In our opinion, the winner is for OPOY, Kason, the MVP is Sterry. Well, then if the nominations for Offensive Player of the Year as they stand now are a guy that we think is the most valuable in Sterry, Kason, who we probably would give the award to if it was up to us, and then we already had mentioned Scott Hamilton, to put a Siobhan Richardson, to put a Manny Diaz, we would have to argue that offensively, those guys had a more impressive season than the guys we're removing. And I don't think you can make that claim with the offensive numbers that Scott Hamilton put up. I don't think that we could look away from those. And Sterry Codrington and Kason Campbell offensively, just pure statistical output. There's no one that's even, relatively close, in my opinion, to what those guys were able to do. So it makes it difficult to spread out the nominations when, if we're just going by the criteria, the same criteria fit for OPOY this year as MVP, because the best performers were also, in my opinion, the most important. I think we look a couple years ago when Huff won the award, he was not up for either defensive or offensive player of the year, because when you looked at his raw statistics, he was not the top performer offensively and not the top performer defensively. But because he played both sides of the ball and was among the better leaders for the Animals that season, and his impact was felt more in the culture of the team and going from an 0 for team to a championship contender, the offensive player of the year that year was definitely a different player than the MVP. And I think the offensive player of the year that year was either, I think it was David Tender. No, that was last year. Two years ago was maybe RTC. I don't know, but my argument is in this individual season of 2025, it just so happens that statistically the numbers bear out offensive player of the year, that these are the top performers. Those also just happen to be, in my opinion, the most valuable of the guys that we're mentioning as well.
I have no problem with being overruled.
I mean, Dub, what's your take to kind of be the deciding vote in which way we go with these nominations? Because there is no right and wrong. It's just, the easiest way is if we solidify the definition of what these awards mean, then we can kind of, set the precedent. But if you're the kind of the deciding vote, what's your opinion?
I think it should be I mean, it's tough to not deny an athlete's greatness because, I mean, again, it's very rare that you see another position other than quarterback win the MVP, which kind of sucks because there's other players that are deserving of that award. No, Will Franklin, no awards have been given out yet. We're trying to bring it down to the 3 nominees to come to a vote, and then the panel will vote, and then we will announce the winners of this award. Well, trying to get input from everybody else. As you just see, it's me, Chris, and Corey, which, again, it has been asked out for the others that are a part of the other side of the ball network to give their nominations, so on and so forth. We're just waiting on them to give their responses. But I think realistically, which sucks, but I mean, if you win one award, then okay. The year David Tender won Rookie of the Year and Offensive Player of the Year, it set some it made some people upset, for lack of a better term. And some people thought that others should have got the award, but it went to him. And that's not taken away from what Tinder did, because Tinder was deserving to be nominated for both awards. My thing is this: I mean, if you get nominated in multiple categories, then that's their right. They should have that honor. Because I mean, how many? I mean, I go to music awards. How many times have you seen artists nominated for multiple awards in different categories? So, I mean, I don't
And
think
just to correct myself from earlier, the year Huff won the MVP, it was Mark Bagway won
that
Offensive Player.
Player of the Year, yes,
So
2023.
yeah, and that's a whole different conversation. He basically did that on like 4 games, but
How many? And I'll ask the questions. In the past, how many players were in each category?
nominations, it's all the same, right? So
Has
I
it always
think,
been 3?
well, no, this is
No.
last year the nominations were that whole ridiculous list of like 13 guys, and 4 of them were always from the Octane, right?
Yeah.
So the
No,
first,
and the only reason that I'm asking that, and let me paint a picture before we move on. The reason why I'm asking that is because if you have more than 3 players, then doubling up and letting people vote isn't a big deal. But when you only have 3 players and you're going to say, okay, we've got 3 guys in this category, 3 guys in that category. In this case, Will, we're talking about Offensive Player of the Year and MVP. We have Offensive Player of the Year, Offensive Rookie of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year, MVP, Returner of the Year, and Defensive Rookie of the Year. Those are all your categories. So if we start to look at this and say, okay, we don't have 7 players, 6 players. We've got 3. So you're making the same 3 players, and I'm not saying they're not deserving. Don't get me wrong, but you're making 3 players, the exact same 3 players are going to be categorized as Offensive Player of the Year and MVP. So you're not giving those awards any other credence except those 3 players for those 2 categories.
So what should be the limit? Should the limit be 5?
Well, I think it should. I think that it should allow for other players, because basically what we're doing, the 3 of us are not going to decide on who wins. The 3 of us are only deciding on who we think should be in each category. So that's why I'm saying if you're looking at it through that lens, let the people make the decision. As far as, I have no problem with these 3 guys being Offensive Player of the Year in that category if we are able to give more than those 3 players. Because now we're going to say, okay, here's your 3 for Offensive Player of the Year. Here's your 3 for MVP. Yeah, they're the same. Just pick the best one.
well, let's say that we are, worst case scenario, limited to 3 each. Since we're not picking the award, we can't say, oh, well, since this guy won this award, he shouldn't be nominated for the other award. Right?
And that's not what I'm getting at. What I'm saying is we should have an opportunity to have more than 3 players. Again, it is the same thing that I've been arguing from the beginning. It isn't that I don't think the same 3 guys should be Offensive Player of the Year. It's just that we are limited to 3 players, which makes our sight and what we're looking at very narrow as far as who the Offensive Player of the Year could be compared to who could be MVP.
And to answer that question, I think we will do a first and second team at some point. Last year, what we did is we did an A7FL top 50. So there was a top 7
49
at
plus
each.
1.
Yeah, so there was a top 7 at each position plus a guy. So we go a little even further than just the what would be 28 there for first and second team. We'll get that to you. That's not going to be an awards list. But if you're interested in an all A7 first and second team, stay tuned this offseason on the other side of the ball. We may once again give you the A7FL other side of the ball top 50, 50, 50. And I might even do that stupid, gimmick with my voice again. But getting back
Like
to
you
the
just did.
awards, I mean, I think the 3 is just an arbitrary limit that was placed on us. If we want to break the rules, then I guess we could do whatever we want. But just sticking to the framework, I think the decision is if we don't nominate the same 3, my argument would be that I would have to be convinced that there are guys more deserving of the nomination over the guy we remove in that specific category. And many seasons, I think there is a diversification of who's mentioned in some of these awards. But when you look at both the raw totals of statistics as well as the way that, these teams, finished up, which is, I think, more of, who's valuable to their team and not just putting up numbers, it just seems that there is overlap because of the 2 top guys for BIC having record breaking years. And when you look at the rest of the statistical, options in the entire league, for both awards, I think when you look at what was done, who's important to their team, right? It's hard to argue that Scooter Hamilton isn't mentioned for both of those awards, because if we're impressed with Sterry's numbers, I would argue that with 3 less games, because Sterry had the 10 listed games, Scott only had 7, that Scott's numbers are just as impressive. Um, if you look at them on a per games basis. And the only reason I would argue that Sterry's season was, more valuable is that he failed to turn the ball over and ran the ball a hell of a lot more. So I don't know. I think it's tough. I think, yes, we could try to include people in the conversation, but the conversation we're having is kind of that preliminary whittling down. And for each of these awards, if we're just being honest to the fans, I think we have to go with the best 3. And regardless of whether they show up on other lists or get the recognition a good season deserves or not, in my opinion, which could be, I could be persuaded, the top offensive performers this year just so happen to be the top 3 most valuable guys in the league.
Well, there we have it.
I guess.
To me, it was just all that debate was for nothing. We could have just said, okay, that's what we're going to do. Left it alone.
Well,
all the debates for nothing.
I'm saying, to put it out there, who do we take off of either list if we're going to?
There's not even a debate for it. We said enough about it. We have our 3 offensive players of the year: Scott Hamilton, Sterry Codrington, and Kason Campbell. We've got our 3 MVP players of the year: Scott, Sterry Codrington, Kason Campbell, and Scott Hamilton. Done. So, returner of the year.
I mean, Savion Cunningham just by default probably is included, right? Did he have a good returning year this year?
He hardly was out there for returns.
All right, then if you guys saw it more than I did, because he played for
the Hunters.
And I honestly did not see him make the impact that we're used to. Was it the Hunters or was it the Stealth?
No, it was the
Hunters.
Oh, it was the Hunters. Oh, well.
Which is quite shocking because they did not utilize him at his talents like they should have.
No, not even close. And in all honesty, when you look at who is up here for the top 1, 2, 3, 4, it would be Ashanti Worthy, Kyle Ward, Kwani Morgan, and Marcellus Pack would be the top 4.
I feel like the stats in Vegas are off then, because I'm pretty sure there were guys.
I would have to agree with you, because the other side of this is
Prime's not on there, and he had more. He had at least 2 back for kick returns.
Well, I'm just looking at so if we're going to look at 2 touchdowns, he would be tied because the top return guy for touchdowns are 2.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
realistically, the other side of it is we also know that Richardson had 2 touchdowns as well
Mm-hmm.
on returns, and he's not on here either.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. Like that, those numbers don't sound complete on the Vegas side.
No, not even.
Because-
They don't even sound close.
Because I would say that as much as Ashanti does well with his returns, you know, the 2 that Kyle Ward had were I think both in the playoff game, weren't they?
Well, here's something that I'd really love you guys to think about. Okay, and when I say this, I seriously want you guys to think about this. You had Ashanti Worthy had 36 attempts for 1,177 yards, 32.7 yards average, with only 2 touchdowns and 5.6% touchdown rate. That doesn't seem like it's correct either.
Well, he didn't. He got a lot of yards, but he didn't get a lot of scores. In my
no, but what I'm saying with that, Corey, is, and it wasn't so much the touchdown ratio. What I'm saying is 36 attempts, 1,177 yards at a 32.7 yard average. That sounds right to you?
The math, or were those his statistics on the season?
That's what they're saying is on the season. I thought he had, because I mean, in all the games that I ever watched with BIC, Worthy was returning. I would have thought he had more than 36.
Well, I mean, when you look at it in 10 games,
that's only 3.6 per game.
Well, but that's what I'm saying. So if you really think about BIC's season, in 10 games, that means that there's always 1 per game minimum that a team will throw off for either first or second half, right?
You got the first half throw off, you got the second half throw off,
and so that means
you have
26
all the ones
times
after scores.
Yeah, 26 times teams scored on BIC, which some of the lower teams barely scored on them. But then you look at the playoff game. I think they were rotating Ashanti Worthy in against Sickwood, which was a high scoring game, which would have been another 6 opportunities. I think that number is probably right, because I don't think he gets a lot of opportunities because a lot of teams don't score a lot of points on BIC, right? So, you know, most guys are throwing it out of bounds on the 4th down one. So those aren't attempts in general. Listen, I think when it comes down to it, I think we said the 3. I think it would probably, in my opinion, be Shannon Allen, Siobhan Richardson, and Ashanti Worthy, because when you look at the numbers on the East Coast, Ashanti has the volume and he does make big plays, but the numbers from Kyle Ward, I think 2 of those 2 touchdowns were both in the playoff game, so that's just 1 game that he had that impact. And I didn't see Quani Morgan for most of the season for the Animals. And then you look at the other name I think that was on there, Marcellus Pack, for the Watchmen. You know, he was our returner of the year last year. That's a huge drop off because last year he had 9 touchdowns.
Really?
Yeah, that was insane.
I'm still blown away that there was the leader only had 2 touchdowns. So I mean,
that goes to show that the coverage teams were pretty good this year and deserve credit. I think that's big.
Well, yeah, they're pretty good, but I mean, averaging 32.7 yards or 32.7 yards as on a return, that's not bad. I would have thought Ashanti Worthy would have broken more than 2 for touchdowns. So.
Yeah, I mean, most of the guys catch the ball at around the 10-yard line, so an average of 35-ish is, you know, pretty much midfield every time.
Yeah. So I mean, we got right now for returners.
Did Danye Lyons play enough this season to be
I don't even
that?
have him on here
because he had the 1 in the championship game and then was iced out. So obviously he has 1.
Well, but he also throughout the year, I think he also had like 3.
Yeah, I find it hard to believe that he didn't have more than 2 in the regular season.
Yeah, I would agree. But now we the last one that we got to do is defensive rookie of the year.
Yeah, and I think this one's relatively straightforward. It's Dub's guy. It's Prime, who we've been mentioning for many of these awards, and for the Animals rookie defensive back to lead the league in interceptions, I think there's no question he deserves the nomination for rookie of the year on the defensive side, Robert
Oh,
Long.
Robert Long.
And I don't think in just my, I can't think of another rookie other than
Dude, who
IG
was Dub's choice again? I'm sorry, I'm
Moses Smith.
Moses
Yeah.
Moses Smith. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's a good 3 there.
These are some hard decisions, man. I will. I'll be honest. These are some very hard decisions. So,
well, when you whittle them down to 3, you're like you said, Chris. You're taking away the rest of the guys that deserve.
No, wait a minute.
Like, a part of the conversation.
If you said, did you say defensive player of the year?
Yeah,
defensive rookie.
Defensive rookie.
Rookie.
Of the year.
Oh, okay, rookie. Yeah, Mo for sure, Mo. Okay.
Yeah. So what we have right now, offensive player of the year, Scott Hamilton, Sterry Codrington, and Kason Campbell. Offensive rookie of the year, Canyon Stone King, Siobhan Richardson, and Shannon Allen.
I said Anthony Service, but we can go at Shannon Allen.
Defensive player of the year, I think was the one that we all agreed on. We all picked our one guy. So we got Trey Baskerville, Shannon Allen, and Chris Cunningham. MVP, Sterry, Kason, Scott. Returner, Shannon Allen, Siobhan Richardson, Ashanti Worthy. And defensive rookie of the year, Shannon Allen, Robert Long, and Moses Smith.
I like it.
Oh yes.
You guys for the last 8 minutes want to do executive of the year?
Executive of the year. Do you want to give us the names?
I don't know. I mean, we can go Mark Gray. I think he deserves some credit for taking a team.
I think you would have to throw that in the category of coach of the year.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Executive, because there's guys that are general managers that aren't they aren't coaches, and there's coaches that are both, and then there's coaches that are Phil Jacksons and just kind of manage a room full of fucking, high ego, high football IQ players and kind of, and then there's K-Wack, who's in everybody's DMs, typing sweet nothings. So I don't know, like, so executive, right? But I don't know, like, if we were to just fuck around with it, I would say Mark Gray's, the job he did, making a Sickwitted team that, there were people thinking that they were going to drop out of the number 2 spot in the division. I mean, technically, yeah. And look, I don't think that they were on the Insomniacs level this year, but I think a huge amount of praise goes to the executive that fills the Jeremy Geary size hole that Sickwitted was left with. Not to mention,
I will say this: out of all the years that I've known Mark Gray,
yeah,
I've never known him to lose players and not come back strong. Ever.
Yeah, I mean, I think he deserves
credit. When we heard everybody, including the guys from Stealth, talking about, they're the number 2 team, I'm like, man, no, I don't care that Gary's gone. You cannot count out Sickwitted as long as they've got Mark Gray running
the show,
running the team. Man, look, you better pack your lunch because it's going to be a long day for you.
But
that's the way you want to look at it.
But what were we saying all along leading up to the season? Said, do not think that Mark Gray's not out there recruiting, because if you don't think he's not, shame on you. Slap yourself for not thinking that. He deserves some credit.
He deserves a lot of credit. He's the one that brought in Stone King. He's the one that brought in Richardson. Mm-hmm. If you take both those players off that team,
It's a drastically
And
different. It's
they would have
drastically
been,
different.
yeah, they would have been. Stealth would have been number 2 in the league and in the division, and Sick would have probably been third.
Well, and the
Granted,
other thing,
but that's
the
not what
other thing
happened.
is he takes a guy that's like a wide receiver. You know, I seen him on the Vegas page with a look at me post. Right, he
Who's
takes
that?
a guy in bets and puts him at defensive end, and all of a sudden that worked beautifully. Betts was an impact player on both sides of the ball, and he was kind of playing like a
What?
jack of all trades position. That's coaching.
And
Him,
I
He
think
him,
would,
him.
and
Go,
Zach.
yeah,
Zach would
and
be
then
the other
he
one.
was able to somehow
and
get Josiah Sal to say, "Yeah, I'm back in the fold." So that's good
and
too.
and also another Swiss Army knife to piggyback off Corey. What do you do with Iquan Corsi? Having Iquan Corsi everywhere
True.
on the field. So,
Just a
I'm
playmaker.
yeah. So I mean,
Which he also got as a free agent, basically addition. The other guys, obviously, shout outs to Coach James, who look, when he's a coach, he is a coach, but in the same way that a CEO is the coach of a major college or an NFL team. Because I will say that I think the down to down coaching is done by the 11 or 12 guys that are active coaches that play on the roster. But without a guy over the top kind of setting the tone in a Coach James, putting these guys in the best position to succeed, I think that he's obviously up there. And look, he's been involved in this league for 3 years. He's been in 3 championship games and won 2 of them. And then for BIC, you look at all the guys, right? Kenny Stansbury, what KWAC does in recruiting, and then the figurehead in Carl Meisner. You know, I don't know which of the 3 is the most important, but I would just say Carl, because without Carl's support, nothing gets done for BIC. But just if we're just filling time with executive of the year, those are 3 guys
well,
deserve some
another
credit.
person, another person I would throw in there is he was one of our guests during the season, but the gentleman that put the Renegades together, I think he deserves some.
Ron Clerk.
Yes, he
Oh,
deserves
absolutely.
he deserves some credit because I mean to take what the
Oh
animals
yeah.
were, to take
Oh
where the
yeah.
Renegades were last season, and then
Tell me about it.
to basically have the eventual champions on the ropes twice and just could finish. He deserves some accolades for what he did, turning around the Eastern Renegades, and now can the Renegades take that next step in 2026, like the animals try to do from 23 or from 24 to 25? That remains to be seen. But I mean, yeah, Clark deserves some credit and some accolades and admiration for what he did with the East Orange Renegades for sure.
Yeah, I'm just bitter that he decided to give the Renegades one of the best offensive lines in the league the year after I'm not there.
I understand, Corey. I
To be
understand.
fair, to
I
just be open.
Is
I
that you being a little
understand.
butthurt there, buddy?
What? You don't know me to be a little bit petty with certain things.
That's true. My bad. You're never a little petty.
But
All
honestly,
right.
Ron Clerk did a hell of a job. And
Yes,
if
he
we're
did.
doing a GM of the Year award, honestly, the biggest turnaround was that team's turnaround. And if you put him on the nominations, he probably wins the award.
And there
I
goes the
mean,
dog.
yep. We got to. We'll see. We'll see how all this stuff pans out. That's for damn sure. And since we got, is that a minute left? Damn.
Yeah, one manly
Time
minute.
flies.
We could party
Time
shot
flies.
this and be out on time.
Yep. So I guess I'll say it. I'll take Dub's position since I opened. Final thoughts, gentlemen.
A lot of deserving candidates for these awards. Hopefully we can get some more from the other panel to join us to where we can really have a full-fledged discussion of these awards and the players that I think are nominating of these awards. And just like I said, looking forward to seeing some football on TV. Full-fledged of BS football starts to where we can scout and watch. And also
I wrote down the names. That's all I was pointing out. Just wrote
Chris-
down the names.
Chris writing the names of clipboards, but also just the appreciation of just talking ball with you gentlemen is always a fun way to go through the evening of just talking football and just appreciative to be associated with you gentlemen. That's all I got.
Well, I will be. I'm sorry, Corey. Go ahead.
Yeah,
I'm not being a gentleman. Go ahead, man.
I think I'm interested to hear if there is other input from other guys, like Dub is saying, but they're not here. So as much as I love them, fuck them. I don't think they could come up with anything better than we did. And no, and respectfully, of course, But I will
Fuck 'em
say that
respectively. Got it.
as much as I sound like I was like hammering against what Chris was saying, I kind of agree with him in general. Like nobody wants to see the same names over and over again. But the weird thing about the 2025 season is really this season when we look back, there was a lot of fun, but it was really a procession of a rematch. It was the story of the 2025 season was the Insomniacs marching their way back to defend, and the BIC clawing their way through a really tough, regular season and playoff to get revenge. And we saw it all come to fruition in that championship game in which BIC was able to, get that redemption. And it sets up an arc for next season that I hope has a couple more players into it as we talk about Animals and Siquidid and Renegades and some of the other contenders. But that redemption arc is a hell of an entertainment cliche. And if 2025 was a redemption arc, we might get another one in 2026. Maybe a BIC Insomniacs 3 as these two heavyweights claw back to another shot at each other.
Well, for me, I'll just say this. I've always been a proponent when you are the champion that there are some certain things that should go your way. Um, I'm not saying negative. Congratulations to BIC, but I think that championship game twice on the East Coast. Does that mean that it'll be twice here on the West Coast over the next two? Don't know. Don't care. Just pointing it out. The other side of this is we had a lot of fantastic players that have been brought up for this season. A lot of record-breaking seasons for these guys. A lot of great football that I was very privileged to sit and watch on both coasts. And I must say that, as this league hopefully continues to grow, we start to see even more of that. I know that people are talking more than they have in the past about the A7, which is fantastic. The reason why I bring that up is my niece was working out in the gym, and lo and behold, she told me what was on the championship game for A7, and it was a replay. So obviously, people are seeing it. People are understanding what's going on. So I hope that pays dividends as we move into the 2026 season. For me, man, it's going to be fun. I'm going to be back down in Laughlin over the weekend. One of the things that I was thinking about doing was driving by the field house, seeing if they've done anything with it. But it's going to be an interesting weekend, and it's going to have some nostalgia to it being down there. The only thing that I will say is that I wish you guys were going to be joining me because it'd be even more fun. But nonetheless, I just say, get ready for some football. And the good thing about it is we have football once the NFL starts. We will have football from September all the way through June of next year. So that is something that I am definitely looking forward to because unlike my co-host and Dub, I am not a huge baseball fan. Don't know why. I've never been a huge basketball. I'm lying. I used to be a huge basketball fan, but I just can't stand LeBron. Nonetheless, I hope everybody has a great week, rest of it, great weekend, enjoy. Um, Bigger piece of it, be kind to one another. That's what we need in this world. Outside of that,
It's clobbering time. Just kidding. No. Appreciate everybody for joining us here on episode number
another
146.
movie I got to go see.
It's good. You'll enjoy it. I might
Still got to
watch
go
it.
see Superman.
You have a you heck, you might need to go have a weekend at the movies or something. Anyhow,
Right?
for Chris, for Corey, thank you everyone for chiming in and joining us. We'll see you next week for episode number 147, and hopefully we'll even have a bigger panel to discuss these nominations and these awards. But in the meantime, we'll see you on the other side of the ball. And as always, take care of yourself and each other. Ta-ta for now.